Hey, besties. Welcome back to Thick Thighs and Murder Vibes. Today, we are going to do part 2 of the Missy Bevers case. If you somehow skipped part 1, first of all, what are you doing? Hit pause and go listen to it and then come back. Trust me, you'll want the full story. Now, for everyone else, let's catch up. Missy Bevers was a 45-year-old fitness instructor, devoted mom of 3, and by every account, the kind of person who lit up a room. On April 18th, 2016, she showed up before sunrise to teach her Camp Gladiator class at Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, Texas. What she didn't know was that someone was already inside waiting, not hiding, not rushing, just wandering, dressed head to toe in police-style tactical gear, carrying a hammer, casually opening doors, breaking glass, and roaming the empty church for nearly 30 minutes before Missy arrived. We have the surveillance footage of this person. We know what they were wearing. We know how they walked. We know roughly how tall they were, and somehow, we still don't know who they are. When Missy encountered that person, she was brutally murdered. The autopsy revealed both blunt force trauma and gunshot wounds, with the gunshot wounds determined to be the cause of death. Whoever did this came prepared. This wasn't random. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment attack. Someone planned this. And 10 years later, we still have no arrest, no charges, and no answers. So today, we're digging into everything that came after. The investigation, the evidence, the people closest to Missy, the theories that have divided investigators and true crime communities for nearly a decade. And by the end of this episode, I have a feeling you're going to be asking the exact same question I was asking while researching this case. What are we missing? So, let's get into it. Let's talk about what the investigation revealed about Missy's personal life, because this is where things get messy and complicated, and where a lot of people started pointing fingers. I'm going to need you to put on your critical thinking caps and remember that real life is messy and complicated, and not every marriage problem equals murder. Because when the search warrants in this case were released, the people saw what investigators had uncovered about Missy and Brandon's relationship. The internet absolutely lost its mind and immediately decided Brandon must be guilty. And I get it, I do. The spouse is always the first suspect in a murder investigation. And statistically, that makes sense. When a married woman is killed, the husband is the most likely perpetrator. That's just facts. But facts also require evidence. And we need to talk about what was actually found versus what people assumed. So let's dive into the messy, uncomfortable details of the Bevers' marriage. And I'm going to try really hard not to be a complete asshole about it, because these are real people dealing with real problems, and one of them is dead. So, when investigators started digging into Missy's life, which is standard procedure, by the way, they look at everything. They discovered that the Bevers family was struggling financially, and I don't mean, oh no, we can't afford the vacation this year. Struggling. I mean serious financial stress. The warrants revealed that Missy and Brandon had significant debt. Credit card debt, financial obligations, they were having trouble meeting. The kind of money problems that keep you up at night and cause massive stress in a marriage. Missy's Camp Gladiator business was doing okay, but it wasn't bringing in enough to solve their financial issues. Brandon was working, but again, not enough to dig them out of the hole they were in. And here's the thing about financial stress. It destroys marriages. It just does. Money problems are one of the leading causes of divorce in America. When you're worried about paying bills, when you're fighting about spending, when you're both stressed and exhausted and feeling like you're drowning, it takes a toll. It creates resentment. It creates conflict. It makes people say and do things they wouldn't normally say or do. And yes, Missy and Brandon were having financial problems. Does that mean Brandon killed her? No. It means they were a normal American couple dealing with the same shit millions of other couples deal with every single day. But wait, there's more. Because the financial stress wasn't the only issue in their marriage. The warrants also revealed that there were indications of marital tension and conflict. I'm being vague here because the specific details haven't all been made public. But what we know is that their marriage was going through a rough patch. There were reports, and again, I'm treading carefully here because some of this is speculation based on warrant language, that there may have been infidelity issues. Either Missy or Brandon or both may have been involved with other people, or at least accused of being involved with other people. The warrants mention investigators looking into Missy's communications with other men, and they also looked into Brandon's activities and relationships. Now, before anyone starts clutching their pearls and screaming, motive, let me remind you that lots of marriages have infidelity. Lots of couples work through it. Lots of people have affairs and don't murder their spouse. Infidelity is shitty and hurtful and destructive, but it's not the same as being a murderer. Here's where things get weird and where the internet really went off the rails. The warrants reference a creepy or strange message that was part of the investigation. The exact content of this message hasn't been fully disclosed publicly, but it was apparently something that caught investigators' attention and made them look more closely at certain aspects of Missy's life and relationships. Some reports suggest this message was sent to Missy and was threatening or disturbing in nature. Others suggest it was related to her personal relationships or her fitness business. The vagueness is maddening because we don't know if this message was from the killer, from someone who knew something about the murder, or if it was completely unrelated and just happened to be weird timing. What we do know is that investigators thought it was significant enough to mention in warrant documents. But significant how? Was it a threat? Was it evidence of a stalker? Was it related to an affair? Was it just some random creepy thing that turned out to be nothing? We don't know. And that ambiguity has led to approximately 10,000 internet theories, most of which are completely unfounded speculation. So why Brandon became a focus? You've got financial problems, marital tension, possible infidelity, and a creepy message. Add that all together, and of course, investigators are going to look hard at Brandon Bevers. That's literally their job. Brandon was questioned extensively. His alibi was checked and rechecked. His finances were examined. His communications were reviewed. His behavior before and after Missy's death were scrutinized. And you know what? That's appropriate. That's what should happen when someone is murdered. You look at the people closest to them first. But here's what's important. Brandon has never been named as a suspect. He has never been charged. And, as far as we know, his alibi checked out. Brandon was out of town on a fishing trip when Missy was killed. He wasn't home. He wasn't at the church. He has witnesses who can place him elsewhere. Now, could he have hired someone? Could he have been involved in planning it even if he wasn't physically there? Sure, theoretically, but there's no evidence of that. No evidence of him hiring a hitman. No evidence of him paying someone. No evidence of him conspiring with anyone. And what I need everyone to understand, having financial problems and marital issues does not make you a murderer. If it did, half the country would be in prison. Brandon Bevers lost his wife, the mother of his children, his partner of 18 years, and instead of being allowed to grieve, he immediately became a suspect. His private life was exposed. His marriage problems were made public. His financial struggles were broadcast to the world. And he had to deal with all of that while also trying to help his 3 daughters cope with losing their mother. Can you imagine going through the worst trauma of your life and having everyone assume you're responsible? Having people on the internet dissecting your marriage, your finances, your every move, looking for evidence that you're a killer? I'm not saying Brandon is perfect. I'm not saying their marriage was perfect. I'm saying that being an imperfect husband in an imperfect marriage doesn't make you a murderer. Brandon has spoken publicly about Missy's murder over the years. Though he's understandably become more guarded as time has gone on, he's addressed the investigation, expressed frustration with the lack of progress, and talked about the impact on his family. Recently, Brandon reportedly told Crime Stories that he's done talking about Missy's murder. And honestly, I don't blame him. He spent 10 years under a microscope, 10 years having his grief questioned, 10 years dealing with speculation and accusation. At some point, you have a right to say, I'm done. I've said everything I can say. Leave me alone. His daughters have also spoken out recently about living through the pain of their mother's unsolved murder. They've talked about the toll it's taken on their family, the difficulty of not having answers, and the ongoing trauma of knowing their mother's killer is still out there. And look, I'm not here to canonize Brandon Bevers. I don't know him. I don't know what their marriage was really like behind closed doors. But I also don't think it's fair to assume he's guilty just because they had problems. Every piece of evidence we have, the surveillance footage, the timeline, the physical evidence, points to someone else. Someone in the tactical gear. Someone who was in that church waiting for Missy. Someone who brought weapons and used them. Someone who was not Brandon Bevers. Could Brandon have orchestrated it? Could he have hired someone? I guess it's theoretically possible. But where's the evidence? Where's the money trail? Where's the communication with a hitman? Where's literally any proof that he was involved? The internet loves to play detective and the internet loves to blame the husband. But we can't convict people based on, well, they had money problems and maybe someone cheated. That's not how justice works. That's not how evidence works. So yes, Brandon was investigated. Yes, his marriage had problems. And yes, those problems made him a natural person of interest. But unless there's evidence we don't know about, evidence that police are sitting on, Brandon Bevers is a grieving widower who lost his wife in a horrific way and has spent a decade under suspicion for a crime he didn't commit. And that's its own kind of tragedy. All right, besties, let's move on to the other people who were investigated, because Brandon wasn't the only person police looked at. Not by a long shot. So here's where this case gets even more frustrating, if that's even possible. Because when you have a murder with no clear suspect, what happens? Everyone becomes a suspect. And I mean everyone. Police investigate people who knew Missy. Internet sleuths investigate people who might have known Missy. Reddit detectives investigate people who were in the same zip code as Missy. And before you know it, you've got a dozen different theories, 100 different persons of interest, and absolutely zero concrete answers. So let's talk about who was actually investigated, who the internet thinks should be investigated, and why, after 10 years, we still don't have a definitive suspect. Buckle up, because this is going to be a ride. Let's start with the obvious question that everyone asks when they see that surveillance footage. Is the killer a cop or a former cop or someone with law enforcement training? Because that tactical gear isn't just a costume from Party City. That's real gear, or at least a very convincing replica. The helmet, the vest, the whole setup. It looks professional. It looks like something someone in law enforcement would wear. And the way this person moves through the church, breaking into rooms, carrying themselves with this weird confidence, Some people think that screams cop, or at least someone who's been trained in tactical operations. So, did investigators look at current or former law enforcement in the area? Did they check if anyone had recently purchased tactical gear? Did they look at military personnel, security guards, people who work in police supply stores? I would hope so, because that seems like investigation 101. But we don't know. Police haven't said. The problem with this theory is that tactical gear is actually not that hard to get. You can buy it online. You can get it at surplus stores. You don't need to be a cop to own it. But while the gear suggests someone who's familiar with law enforcement equipment, it doesn't necessarily mean they are law enforcement. Here's what keeps me up at night. A lot of things, obviously. What if they are? What if this person is a cop? Or was a cop? Or has connections to law enforcement? Because that would explain a lot. It would explain why they knew how to avoid leaving evidence. It would explain why they seemed so comfortable on camera. It would explain why this case has been so hard to solve. Because they know exactly how investigators work and how to stay ahead of them. Then we have the church connection. Creekside Church of Christ is where Missy held her fitness classes. It was a space she used regularly, a community she was part of. So naturally, investigators looked at people connected to the church members, church staff, people who had access to the building, people who knew Missy's schedule. And here's the thing. Churches are complicated social ecosystems. There are politics, there are conflicts, there are people who don't get along. Was there someone at the church who had a problem with Missy? Someone who resented her using the space? Someone who had a personal grudge? From what we know, investigators did interview church members and looked into anyone who might have had access to the building or knowledge of Missy's schedule. But nothing concrete has ever been made public. No one from the church has been named as a suspect. No one has been arrested. The internet, of course, has theories. There are Reddit threads dedicated to analyzing church members, looking at who was there that morning, who had keys to the building, who might have known the security camera locations. But here's the problem with internet theories. They're based on speculation, not evidence. Just because someone went to the same church as Missy doesn't make them a killer. Missy was a Camp Gladiator instructor, and Camp Gladiator is a competitive business. There are other fitness instructors, other trainers, other people trying to build their own client base. Could someone have been jealous of Missy's success? Could there have been professional rivalry that turned deadly? It sounds far-fetched, I know. Like, who murders someone over fitness class competition? But people have killed for less. People have killed over parking spots and lawn disputes. So, is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? I don't know. What we do know is that investigators looked into Missy's professional life, her business relationships, her interactions with other trainers and instructors. But again, no public suspects, no arrests, no clear leads that have been disclosed. And then we have the personal grudge theory. This is where things get really murky because personal grudge could mean literally anything. An ex-boyfriend from years ago, someone Missy had a falling out with, a neighbor she had a dispute with, a parent from her kid's school who had beef with her, someone who felt wronged by her in some way, real or imagined. The problem is, Missy, by all accounts, was a well-liked person. She had friends, she had a community, she had people who loved her. She had marital problems and financial stress, but that doesn't mean she had enemies. That doesn't mean someone hated her enough to plan and execute this elaborate murder, but someone did. Someone hated her enough, or feared her enough, or wanted her dead badly enough to dress up in tactical gear, break into a church, wait for her to arrive, and then kill her. That's not a random act. That's personal. That's targeted. That's someone with a reason. So, who had a reason? That's the million-dollar question. And after 10 years, we still don't have an answer. So beyond Brandon, who we've already discussed, were there other people in Missy's inner circle who were investigated? Friends, family members, people she was close to? The answer is yes. Because that's how investigations work. You start with the people closest to the victim and work your way outward. You look at everyone who had regular contact with Missy, everyone who knew her schedule, everyone who might have had motive or opportunity. But here's where I get frustrated. We don't know who specifically was investigated beyond Brandon. We don't know if there were other people who were seriously considered as suspects. We don't know if anyone was cleared or if anyone is still technically under suspicion. And that's the problem with this case. There's so much we don't know. Police are keeping their cards close to the chest, which I understand from an investigative standpoint, but it also means we're all just speculating in the dark. Oh boy, besties. Let me tell you about the internet's theories, because they range from actually pretty reasonable to, did you hit your head before typing this? There are entire Reddit threads dedicated to analyzing the gait of the tactical gear suspect and comparing it to various people in Missy's life. People have created side-by-side comparison videos. They've analyzed body language. They've measured height and weight based on door frames and the surveillance footage. They've looked at who owns what kind of vehicle. They've tracked down social media posts from people who were in Midlothian that morning. Some of these amateur investigators are genuinely trying to help. They're applying tactical thinking. They're looking at evidence. They're trying to piece together the puzzle. And honestly, sometimes crowdsourced investigation can be valuable. Sometimes the internet notices things that professional investigators miss. But sometimes, and I'm being generous here, sometimes the internet goes completely off the rails. People get accused based on nothing more than they look suspicious, or their walk is kind of similar, or they were in the area that day. Lives get ruined, innocent people get harassed, and we're no closer to solving the case. So while I appreciate the enthusiasm, I also need everyone to remember that we're talking about real people, real lives, real reputations. You can't just throw around accusations because you watched a YouTube video and decided someone seems guilty. And then we have the local versus outsider. Where did this person come from? Here's the question that keeps coming up. Was Missy's killer local, or did they come from outside of the community, specifically to kill her? If they're local, that means there's someone who knew Missy, knew her schedule, knew the church, knew the area, which means they're probably still in the community, living their life, hiding in plain sight. It means someone in that town might know the killer and not even recognize it. If they're an outsider, that makes the case exceptionally harder to solve. It means this person could be anywhere. They could have driven in from Dallas, Houston, even out of state. They could have killed Missy and disappeared back to wherever they came from, leaving no local connections for investigators to trace. The surveillance footage of a vehicle, which we haven't talked about in detail yet, but yes, there's footage of a suspicious vehicle in the area, suggests the killer drove to the church, but we don't know if that vehicle was local or from out of town. We don't know if it was the killer's personal vehicle or something they borrowed or stole. Someone Missy knew versus a complete stranger. Again, another question that haunts me. Did Missy know her killer? If she knew them, this was personal. This was targeted. This was someone with a specific grudge, a specific motive, a specific reason to want her dead. And that means somewhere in Missy's life, her marriage, her business, her friendships, her past, there's a connection to her killer that we haven't found yet. If she didn't know them, if this was a complete stranger, then why? Why Missy? Why that church? Why that morning? Was it random? Was she just unlucky? Was she in the wrong place at the wrong time? The level of planning suggests this wasn't random. The tactical gear, the weapons, the timing, all of this suggests someone who knew Missy would be there, someone who knew she'd be alone, someone who had been watching her, tracking her schedule, waiting for the right moment. But we don't know. We don't know if Missy looked at her killer that morning and recognized them, or if she saw a stranger in tactical gear and had no idea who was about to kill her. The frustrating reality. After 10 years, we should have answers. We should know who was seriously investigated and who was cleared. We should know if there are active suspects or if the case is completely cold. We should know something, but we don't. We have theories. We have speculation. We have internet detectives pointing fingers and professional investigators staying silent. We have a surveillance video that's been analyzed frame by thousands of people, and we still can't definitively say who that person is. Someone out there knows something. Maybe it's the killer themselves, living with the secret. Maybe it's someone who suspects a friend or family member, but is too scared to come forward. Maybe it's someone who saw something that morning and didn't realize it was important. But until someone talks, until someone comes forward with real evidence, we're stuck. We're stuck with theories and speculation and frustration. We're stuck with a grieving family who deserves answers. We're stuck with a killer who's still free. And that, besties, is absolutely unacceptable. So let's talk about what has happened. Or more accurately, what hasn't happened in the 10 years since Missy Bevers was murdered. Because this is where I really start to lose my shit. This is where the frustration becomes almost unbearable. This is where I want to grab every investigator by the shoulder and scream, how is this still unsolved? When Missy's body was discovered on April 18th, 2016, the Mid-Lothian Police Department responded with everything they had. And I want to be clear about this. I'm not saying they didn't take it seriously. They absolutely did. This was a small town's worst nightmare. A beloved community member murdered in a church. Surveillance footage of a suspect, national media attention within hours. The initial response was massive. Crime scene investigators processed every inch of that church. The Texas Rangers were brought in to assist because, yes, when you have a murder this bizarre in a small Texas town, you call in the big guns. The FBI got involved, offering resources and expertise. This wasn't some half-assed investigation. This was all hands on deck. The surveillance footage was released to the public almost immediately, which was the right call. Get those images out there. Let people see the tactical gear suspect. Let someone recognize that weird walk, that build, something. The media coverage was insane. Local news, national news, true crime shows. Everyone was talking about the fitness instructor murdered in a church by someone dressed like a cop. Tips started pouring in, hundreds of them. Police set up a tip line. They follow up on every lead, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. They interviewed everyone who knew Missy. They looked at her phone records, her emails, her social media. They examined her financial records and her husband's financial records. They talked to her fitness class participants, her church community, her neighbors, her family. And for a while, it seemed like surely something would break. With this much attention, this much manpower, and this much evidence, how could it not be solved? But then, nothing. Months went by. Then a year, then 2 years, and the case started to go cold. This is what happens with unsolved cases, and it makes me want to throw things. The initial burst of energy and resources starts to fade. Investigators move on to other cases because always other cases, other crimes, other victims who need attention. the media moves on to the next sensational story. Public interest wanes because people have short attention spans, and if there's no arrest, no dramatic development, they lose interest. By 2017, the case was still technically active, but you could feel the momentum slowing. The daily updates stopped. The press conferences became less frequent. The tips were still coming in, but fewer of them, and most were dead ends or people just speculating based on the viral surveillance footage. In 2018 and 2019, there were occasional media revivals, true crime podcasts covering the cases, news stations doing anniversary pieces, internet sleuths keeping the discussion alive on Reddit and Facebook groups. But from a law enforcement perspective, it felt like the case was treading water. No major breakthroughs, no arrests, no new suspects, publicly identified. And here's what pisses me off. This is when cases get solved or they don't. This is the crucial window. If you don't solve a murder in the first 48 hours, your chances drop dramatically. If you don't solve it in the first year, it becomes exponentially harder. And if you hit the 5-year mark with no resolution, you're looking at a case that might never be solved. Then 2020 hit, and the entire world shut down. COVID-19 dominated everything: resources, attention, manpower. And I'm not saying the pandemic is an excuse for not solving Missy's murder, but let's be real, it didn't help. Law enforcement agencies were stretched thin. Court systems backed up. Everything slowed down. But you know what didn't stop? The internet. True crime communities kept discussing the case. New people discovered it and started their own investigations. YouTube channels analyzed the footage. TikTok creators made videos about the tactical gear suspect. The case stayed alive in the public consciousness, even if it seemed to be stagnating in official channels. In 2021 and 2022, there were a few flickers of hope. Midlothian police would occasionally release statements saying the case was still active. They were still following leads. They hadn't given up. But what leads? What progress? They wouldn't say. And I get it. You don't want to compromise an investigation by revealing too much. But after 5, 6, even 7 years, at some point, transparency becomes more valuable than secrecy. By 2023, we were approaching the 7-year mark. 7 years since Missy was murdered. 7 years of her daughters growing up without their mother. 7 years of Brandon living under a cloud of suspicion. And 7 years of a killer walking free. From 2024 to 2026, a decade of nothing. And now we're here, 2026. 10 full years since Missy Bevers was killed in that church. A decade. And what do we have to show for it? In April of 2026, Midlothian police released a statement, because of course they did. It's the 10-year anniversary, and they have to say something. The statement was basically what you'd expect. The case remains active and ongoing. We continue to evaluate every lead. We're committed to bringing the person responsible to justice. Cool. Great. Fantastic even. But where's the arrest? Where's the suspect? Where's literally any meaningful progress? Brandon Bevers recently told Crime Stories that he's done talking about the case. And honestly, I can't blame him. 10 years of being under suspicion. 10 years of having his life dissected. 10 years of no answers. I'd be done too. His daughters have spoken out about the toll this has taken on their family. They've grown up in the shadow of their mother's unsolved murder. They've had to live with not knowing, with seeing their mother's case discussed and debated and theorized about online, while the person who killed her remains free. What about new technology? Here's what makes me absolutely insane. We're living in an era of incredible forensic technology. Genetic genealogy has solved cold cases that were decades old. The Golden State Killer, for fuck's sake. He was caught because of DNA and family tree databases. Facial recognition technology has advanced dramatically. Gait analysis software has improved. Digital forensics can extract information from devices that would have been impossible 10 years ago. So where is it? Has Midlothian police used genetic genealogy? If they have DNA evidence, have they run the surveillance footage through modern facial recognition systems? Have they brought in new experts and fresh eyes to look at the evidence? I don't know. They won't say. And that's what's so frustrating. We don't know what's being done behind the scenes. Maybe they're working tirelessly and just haven't caught a break. Or maybe this case has been sitting in a file cabinet for years and nobody actively working it except when someone calls in a tip. The reality of cold cases, and here's the truth that nobody wants to hear, most murders get solved quickly or they don't get solved at all. The longer a case goes unsolved, the harder it becomes. Witnesses' memories fade, evidence degrades, people move away, the trail goes cold. And in a small town like Midlothian, resources are limited. They don't have the manpower or budget of a big city police department. They're dealing with other crimes, other cases, other demands on their time and resources. I'm not saying they don't care. I'm saying they're overwhelmed. But Missy Bevers deserves better than that. Her family deserves better than that. This case should be solvable. We have surveillance footage. We have physical evidence. We have a timeline. We have a suspect on camera. This isn't some mystery where we have nothing to go on. We have everything we need, except the one thing that matters, an identification. Now, here's my frustration. And I know I've been frustrated a lot this episode. 10 years, besties. 10 years of a killer walking free. 10 years of a family without answers. 10 years of a case that should have been solved but wasn't. And I know that solving murders is hard. I know that investigators are doing their best with limited resources. I know that sometimes you can have all the evidence in the world and still not be able to identify a suspect. But this case haunts me because it feels like it should be solvable. It feels like somewhere along the way, something was missed. Some lead wasn't followed up on thoroughly enough. Some piece of evidence wasn't analyzed with the right technology. Some witness wasn't interviewed who should have been. Or maybe, and this is dark, someone knows who the killer is and is choosing to stay silent. Someone is protecting them, and someone is keeping their secret. And to that person, if you exist, come forward. Do the right thing. Missy's daughters deserve to know who killed their mother. Brandon deserves to be fully cleared and to move on with his life. The community deserves justice. And the Midlothian Police Department, I'm begging you, don't let this case go cold. Don't let it become just another unsolved murder that gets filed away and forgotten. Bring in outside experts. Use new technology. Re-interview witnesses. Look at the evidence with fresh eyes. Just do something, because 10 years is too long. 10 years, it's unacceptable. And Missy Bevers deserves justice. All right, besties, we're at the end of this deep dive. And I need to be real with you for a minute. I need to step back from the unhinged commentary and the sarcasm and the rage, and I need to talk about why this case, why Missy Bevers matters so much. Because at the end of the day, we're left with 3 massive, haunting questions that have no answers. Who was in that tactical gear? We have footage. We have this person on camera for several minutes. We can see how they walk, how they move, what they're wearing, what they're doing. And after 10 years, thousands of people analyzing every frame, professional investigators with resources and expertise, we still don't know. We don't know if they're male or female. We don't know if they're young or old. We don't know if they're local or from out of town. We don't know if they're a cop, a wannabe cop, or just someone with access to tactical gear. We know nothing. And that's absolutely insane. Why did they kill Missy? What did this 45-year-old fitness instructor and mother of three do to deserve being ambushed in a church at 4 a.m? Was it personal? Was she targeted specifically? Or was she just unlucky? Did she know her killer? Or was this a stranger? Was it about money, jealousy, revenge, or rage? Was it planned for weeks or was it spontaneous? We don't know. And without knowing the why, we can't narrow down the who. Why the hell hasn't this been solved? This is the question that makes me want to scream until my voice gives out. We have surveillance footage. We have physical evidence. We have a timeline. We have a victim whose life was documented and whose schedule was public. We have modern forensic technology that can solve decades-old cold cases. And yet here we are, 10 years later, no arrest, no suspect, no justice. What would it take to solve this case? What's the missing piece? Maybe it's someone recognizing that walk, that distinctive shuffling gait that's been analyzed frame by frame. Someone out there knows someone who walks like that. Maybe it's a family member, a coworker, a neighbor. Maybe you've seen it 1,000 times and never connected it to this case. But if you're listening right now and something about that description makes you think of someone, call it in. Maybe it's someone who was in Midlothian that morning, someone who saw a vehicle they didn't recognize, someone who noticed a person in tactical gear and thought it was weird but didn't report it, someone who heard something, saw something, knows something that seemed insignificant at the time but could be the key to everything. Maybe it's forensic technology we haven't applied yet, genetic genealogy, advanced gait analysis, new ways of processing old evidence. Maybe it's bringing in fresh investigators who can look at this case without the baggage of 10 years of dead ends. Or maybe, and this is what I really believe, maybe it's someone finally deciding to do the right thing. Someone who's been keeping a secret. Someone who suspects a friend, a family member, a spouse. Someone who's been too scared or too loyal or too conflicted to come forward. This is your moment. If you're that person, if you know something, if you suspect something, if you saw something that morning in April of 2026, this is your moment. This is when you decide what kind of person you are. Are you someone who lets a killer walk free? Are you someone who lets 3 daughters live the rest of their lives without knowing who murdered their mother? Are you someone who values loyalty to a murderer over justice for an innocent woman? Because that's what we're talking about here. Not some abstract mystery, not some true crime puzzle of entertainment. We're talking about Missy Bevers, a real person, a mother who will never see her daughters graduate, get married, have children of their own, a wife whose husband has spent 10 years under suspicion, a friend, a teacher, a community member whose life was violently stolen from her in a place that should have been safe. This case matters because Missy Bevers matters. Her life had value. Her death demands justice. And every day that her killer walks free is another day that her family suffers. Another day that justice is denied, and another day that someone gets away with murder. This case matters because it could happen to anybody. Missy was doing everything right. She was working hard, supporting her family, helping people get healthy and strong. She woke up early, she showed up, she did her job, and she was murdered for it. If that can happen to her, it can happen to anybody. This case matters because somewhere out there, a killer is living their life, going to work, spending time with family, sleeping soundly at night, and that is unacceptable. So here's what I need from you, besties. Don't let this case fade into obscurity. Don't let Missy become just another unsolved murder that people forget about. Share this episode, talk about this case, and keep it in the public. Because the moment we stop talking about it is the moment it truly goes cold. If you have any information, about Missy Bevers' murder, contact Midlothian Police Department. You can call their tip line. You can reach out to Crime Stoppers. You can submit anonymous tips. Don't assume someone else has already reported what you know. Don't assume it's not important. Let the investigators decide what's relevant. If you were in Midlothian, Texas on the morning of April 18th, 2016, and you saw anything unusual, a vehicle, a person, anything that didn't seem right, come forward. Even if it seems insignificant. Even if you think it couldn't possibly matter, you might have the one piece of information that breaks this case wide open. If you recognize that gait, that walk, that distinctive shuffle we've talked about, if it reminds you of someone, if it makes you think of anyone at all, don't ignore that instinct and make the call. 10 years ago, Missy Bevers walked into a church to teach a fitness class, and she never walked back out. Someone took her life, someone shattered a family, and someone committed murder. And somehow, they're still walking free. And that's what makes this case so haunting. It's not just that someone was waiting for her. It's that we can watch them. We can watch them wander the halls, open doors, peek into rooms, kill time until she arrives. We know they were there. We just don't know who they are. Somewhere, someone knows exactly what happened inside that church that morning. Maybe it's the killer. Maybe it's someone who's been protecting them. Maybe it's someone who's stayed silent out of fear. But after 10 years, Missy's family is still waiting for the one thing they deserve, and that's answers. The good news is, it's not too late. Cases have been solved after decades. Technology gets better. Evidence can be re-examined. People's consciences have a funny way of catching up with them. Secrets don't stay buried forever. To Missy's daughters, I'm so sorry you've had to spend the last 10 years without your mom. I'm sorry your family has had to carry the weight of unanswered questions. And I hope you know there are so many people who still care, who still talk about your mom, and who still want justice for her. To Brandon, I hope you find peace. I hope you're fully cleared in the court and public opinion. And I hope you can move forward with your life while still honoring Missy's memory. And to the person responsible for Missy's murder, you may have gotten away with it for 10 years, but every year brings new technology, new eyes on the evidence, new investigators, new conversations, and someone knows who you are. Whether it's today, tomorrow, next year, or another 10 years from now, I truly hope the day comes when your name is no longer attached to speculation, but to an arrest. If you know anything about the murder of Missy Bevers, no matter how small it seems, please contact law enforcement. That one detail you've dismissed for years could be the missing piece that finally brings Missy's family answers. If you enjoyed today's episode of Thick Thighs and Murder Vibes, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you're listening. Share the show with your fellow creepy besties or that one friend who's always sending you true crime TikToks at 2 a.m. And if you have a minute, leaving a 5-star review really does help the podcast reach more listeners, and it means more than you know. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, watch your back, because sometimes the scariest thing isn't being followed. It's realizing somebody was already there waiting.